The weak version of you doesn't deserve another chance, because it's the very part that has quietly stripped away your discipline, your dreams, and every promise you've ever made only to abandon them. It's the part of you that stays drowsy before dawn, lazy in the face of discipline, and full of excuses when action is required. It never screams out loud, never declares it will destroy you, but it does so silently. In every moment you procrastinate, in every empty promise you make to yourself, and every time you allow yourself to quit halfway. That version isn't just weak, it's become an expert at making you fail quietly, day after day. You cannot live a grand life if you keep forgiving that version. The more you tolerate it, the more you lose yourself. It's the reason every plan gets delayed tomorrow. It's the voice that tells you there's still time, that you can rest a bit longer, that no one will notice if you skip today. But the truth is, every time you listen to it, you're digging yourself deeper into an ordinary life, and eventually you won't even remember what you once wanted, what you once dreamed of. All that remains is a smooth, forgettable cycle of days repeating themselves. The most dangerous thing about the weak version is not its laziness. It's its ability to rationalize. It makes you feel justified in putting things off. It gives you short-term comfort at a very steep price, the loss of your inner strength and identity. It tricks you into thinking that choosing comfort is freedom, when in reality, it's a velvet-wrapped prison. And if you're not alert enough to see it, you'll live your whole life inside that cage, the door always open, yet you never step out. And then you'll start to wonder, why am I stuck in place? Why do I begin many things but never finish? Why do I talk more than I act? You already know the answer. It's not because you lack skill or talent or opportunity. It's because you've let a weaker version of yourself control your behavior for too long. You no longer make decisions based on goals. You act based on emotions. You don't act because of a larger vision. You merely react to circumstances. And that's what keeps you trapped. Be honest with yourself. How many times have you started something, promising to follow through, only to give up when it got hard? How many times have you quietly backed away without facing the real reason? That's because you've gotten used to letting the weak version decide for you. It has been fed by comfort, by every "I'll do it tomorrow," by the habit of incompletion and the belief that someday I'll return to it. You need to understand this. If you keep living like that, you'll never get the chance to meet the better version of yourself, because the strong version is never born in comfort. It is forged in every moment you fight laziness, every time you work without applause, every time you keep your promise to yourself when no reward awaits you. Inner strength doesn't come from fleeting inspiration. It comes from your ability to say no to your old self. Every single day, without mercy. No one can do that for you. No book, no video, no coach can eliminate the weak version inside you if you're still secretly holding on to it. You must be the one to decide. You must choose. Either keep feeding the saboteur or begin building the inner guide. There is no middle ground. Every choice you make, whether to get up and work or stay lying down, is a vote for one of those two versions. Here's a truth you must engrave in your mind. Action is the dividing line between the weak and the resilient. The strong are not people who always feel okay. They also get tired. They also doubt. They also have dark days. But they don't let those emotions decide their fate. They keep moving. They don't wait for motivation. They don't wait for applause. They just act, no matter how they feel. And that consistency is what destroys the weak version. Not with a single blow, but with 1,000 small cuts, delivered relentlessly, without compromise. Every day you act despite your emotions, you drain life out of the weak version. Every time you finish a task you used to avoid, you strengthen the guide within you. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even when no one is watching, you rewrite the definition of who you are. And one day you'll realize that weak version no longer exists. Not because you hated it, but because you stopped giving it space to live. The harsh truth is this: if you don't eliminate that weak version, it will eliminate you. It will rob you of your confidence, waste your youth, and make you wake up each morning with the sinking feeling that you're living a life far below your potential. And if that doesn't make you act, then nothing else will. It's not that the world is too hard. It's that you've allowed an inferior version to exist for too long. Time won't wait for you. Opportunities don't repeat. But the choice is always yours. And the very first, most urgent choice is not to make a new plan, not to seek inspiration, but to decisively kill off the old self. No drama needed, just a series of bold actions, a clear decision. I will not live like this another day. And from that moment on, everything changes. No real transformation ever begins with lying to yourself. The first truth, and also the harshest, is that you have allowed yourself to drift for far too long. No one forced you to procrastinate. No one made you break promises to yourself. No one stole your opportunities, except you, when you made excuses, avoided action, and comforted yourself with half-told stories, consoling yourself with the feeling that at least I'm trying is not transformation. It's merely a disguise to keep you from feeling guilty. But every night before you sleep, you know deep down you are not living up to what you once expected of yourself. The uncompromising truth doesn't come to hurt you, it comes to wake you up. It is a mirror that doesn't distort the image, doesn't add a gentle filter, doesn't try to make things more bearable. It simply reflects reality. Where you are, what you've done, and more importantly, what you haven't done. If you don't dare to look truth in the eye, you will never change. Because change doesn't arise from comfort, it begins the moment you can no longer tolerate living the same way. And the greatest danger lies in how accustomed you've become to self-justification. I'm just tired. I need more time. I'll start again next week. These words sound reasonable, kind, even compassionate. But in truth, they are soft blankets masking your stagnation. And the longer you use these justifications, the further you drift from reality. You no longer distinguish between genuine effort and the illusion you've created to rational inaction. You don't need another perfect plan. You don't need another motivational push. What you need is the courage to face yourself. To sit down, no blaming, no defending, and ask, why haven't I changed yet? Not because of your job, not because of others, not because of circumstances, but because of you. You've nurtured leniency toward yourself. You've chosen emotion over commitment. You've prioritized momentary comfort over long-term growth. As long as you avoid that question, you remain stuck in your old loop. And no one can pull you out of it, because the essence of change is voluntary action. No one can force you forward. No one can compel your growth. Transformation only happens when you dare to face the root and stop painting over the truth. Don't call procrastination preparation. Don't call lack of discipline self-love. Call it what it is. Identify it. Only then can you restructure your life. You can read hundreds of books, listen to thousands of pieces of advice, but if you continue to live halfway, all that knowledge remains theoretical. True change begins when you can no longer stand repeating the version of yourself from yesterday. When you're tired of talking without doing. When you're disgusted by the habit of quitting halfway. When you no longer want to live a predictable, dull, repetitive life. The cost of not facing the truth doesn't show up immediately. It comes slowly, through the gradual loss of self-belief, through the fading dreams you once held, through the quiet resignation that says, maybe this is as far as I go. But deep inside, you know you can do more. You know you haven't tapped into your full strength. You know there were moments when you were close to touching a better version of yourself. And yet, you let go. Why? Because you weren't honest with yourself, because you still believed you had more time. But time doesn't repeat. Each day that passes either brings you closer to your strongest self or takes you one step further away. And the turning point doesn't lie in any external event, it lies in one decision. I will no longer excuse my own ambiguity. From the moment you dare to call procrastination what it is, to call unkept promises what they are, to admit, I haven't done enough, you've already begun the process of change. No more self-soothing, no more empty promises, no more dressing up failure with excuses, only clarity and the next action. You cannot keep living a double life, one part a dreamer with noble ideals, the other a chronic excuse maker, quitter and avoider. Self-respect cannot grow in the soil of internal deceit. You only begin to truly mature when you sever your ability to lie to yourself. When you accept, I am fully responsible for everything I have done and everything I have failed to do. And it's from that point that you can build a new process. One not based on inspiration, but grounded in inner clarity. A process that doesn't require external supervision because you've already taken control. A process where each step, no matter how small, is built on a foundation of absolute honesty. Remember this, you cannot change if you're not honest about where you stand. No one builds a life from a false map. And if you continue to sugarcoat your reality, you will go in circles with a growing, unshakable disappointment. Truth may hurt, but that pain is the beginning of awakening. Not everyone has the courage to face the truth, but those who do gain the chance to transform their lives. The issue isn't how many times you've failed before. The real question is, will you allow yourself to live one more day in this fog? You can keep telling comforting stories, or you can turn the page with one decisive act. I face everything. I accept it all. And I will change, not because I'm motivated, but because I cannot stand one more day of this repetition. No one is born weak. No one enters the world with a preset gene that programs them to give up halfway. Weakness is not a destiny. It is the result of a chain of repeated choices, unquestioned and unchecked. You didn't become soft because you lacked ability, but because without realizing it, you've trained yourself in the habit of surrender. You've rehearsed quitting for years until now it no longer even feels wrong. It has become an automatic reflex. Every time things get hard, you stop. Every time you feel tired, you retreat. And you no longer recognize that this act, this gentle withdrawal, is building a version of you that deep down, you are not proud of. Look back at your past honestly. How many times have you made plans with strong resolve only to follow through for a few days? How many times have you started with intense motivation only to lose it all because of one justified lazy day? Those short breaks, those I'll let myself relax a little moments. You thought they were harmless, but they were quietly forming a behavioral pattern. Face discomfort, retreat, encounter difficulty, give up, and the more reasonably you quit, the more you erode the sharpness of your inner discipline. What you may not realize is that you've been training your brain to avoid effort. You've taught your body to procrastinate instead of respond. You've programmed your nervous system to default to safety rather than persistence. No one forced you to become weaker. You made the same weakening choices over and over. That's not a crime, but if you don't change it, it becomes a decision. The problem doesn't lie in some big failure. People don't collapse because of one mistake. They become weak from hundreds of small surrenders. So small they go unnoticed. One unfinished task, one snoozed alarm, one I'm not in the mood excuse, 1 minute stretched into an hour into a day into a month, and suddenly a whole year has passed with no real progress. It's not because you lack ability. It's because you've grown used to living below the standards you once set for yourself. Each time you stop halfway, you create a new neural link, where giving up becomes associated with relief, where doing nothing becomes tied to a sense of safety. Over time, you no longer view stagnation as unusual. It becomes the default. It becomes your new normal. And the terrifying part is, you start to accept it. But here's the good news. Just as you trained yourself to grow weak, you can train yourself to become strong again. Your brain is flexible. Your nervous system is reprogrammable. The only condition, you must dare to sever those old circuits, where I'm tired, I rest, I'm bored, I stop, I don't see results, I quit. Each time you act contrary to those old habits, you are redrawing your reflex map. And if you do it often enough, consistently enough, a new identity will emerge. You don't have to become superhuman. You just need to start doing the opposite of what your weaker self would usually choose. When you feel like delaying, start immediately. When you feel no desire, act for just 5 minutes. When results seem far, remember that this is the very moment you are building endurance. You don't need to feel amazing to take action. You just need to understand. Action is the only way to break the old reflex chain. Picture yourself as an athlete who's spent years training with incorrect technique. Now you must retrain from scratch. It will feel awkward, it will feel wrong, it will feel unnatural. But in this very discomfort, you are laying a new foundation. And if you stay the course, what once felt wrong will become normal. What was difficult will become routine. What once made you hesitate will become instinct. Don't wait for inspiration to change. Inspiration is only the starting spark, not a sustainable fuel. What you need is a new behavioral system. Every time you want to stop, push one step further. This isn't just fighting off laziness. It's reprogramming your sense of self. True strength is not never getting tired. It's acting even when you are. It's not always having motivation. It's keeping your commitment even when motivation is gone. The strong aren't different by birth. They just don't allow retreat to become a familiar reflex. From today onward, begin noticing your micro responses. Every time you're about to procrastinate, pause and ask, what am I training right now? Because every behavior is training. You're either training progress or you're training retreat. There is no gray zone, there is no neutral ground, and every small choice is accumulating into the person, strong or weak, that you will ultimately have to live with. You can read hundreds of books, listen to thousands of pieces of advice, write out all your goals on a whiteboard every morning, but if you don't act, all of it is just illusion dressed in a mask of positivity. Action, not motivation, not knowledge, not those fleeting moments when you feel ready, is the only weapon that can decisively extinguish the weaker version of you. That version doesn't fear your logic. It doesn't tremble at the declarations you shout. But it fears action. Because real action is the one thing it cannot coexist with. The weaker version of you doesn't die because you start thinking more positively. It doesn't leave just because you've written down a new plan. It only disappears when you do the things you've been avoiding, delaying, excusing. When you step into the tasks it dreads, resists, and finds uncomfortable. That's when you strike at the root of its existence. It survives because you keep thinking without doing. It grows stronger through cleverly justified procrastination. And it overpowers you because you allow your behavior to follow emotions instead of leading your emotions with behavior. Everything you're seeking, confidence, strength, self-respect, real inspiration, lies behind action. There is no shortcut. There is no secret formula. You cannot rise by standing still. You have to move. Even when the path is unclear, even when everything inside you screams to rest, to stop, to wait. Every step you take in that fog strips power from the weaker self and gives control back to the stronger one inside you. Don't wait for motivation to act. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until things are perfect before you begin. Because if you do, you are unconsciously obeying the weaker version. It always has a seemingly valid excuse. It's not the right time. I need more space. I'm waiting for the spark. But if you look closely, you'll see action has never depended on emotion. Emotion is always driven by action. Inspiration comes after, not before. Belief grows after you do the thing, not before you think about it. And action doesn't need to be big. Don't wait for a grand turning point. Just wake up 15 minutes earlier. Just finish that task you've delayed all week. Just say no to one old habit. Every small action is a brick that helps demolish the house your weaker self has been hiding in. You don't need to shout slogans, you just need to do, and do it consistently, every day, without an audience, without applause. Because the person you're building doesn't need a stage, they need a foundation, built from daily, tangible behaviors. When you act in moments of resistance, you're retraining your nervous system. You're establishing a new connection. I act even when I don't feel like it. And the magic is this: when you repeat it enough times, your brain will begin to believe this is now the standard. You won't need to force it forever. You just need to stay consistent long enough for action to become your new reflex. And once that happens, the weaker version no longer has a habitat. It will die naturally, not through battle, but because the environment it needed, delay and excuse, no longer exists. You might ask, but what if I'm tired? What if I'm truly exhausted? Learn to distinguish between physical exhaustion from real effort and the fatigue caused by prolonged avoidance. Tired from hard work can be fixed with proper rest, but feeling drained when you've done nothing, yet that's the weaker version manipulating you. And the only remedy for that isn't an extra hour of sleep, it's movement regardless of how you feel. Action is also the only path to genuine self-belief. You won't trust yourself just by talking. You won't feel confident just because someone compliments you. All lasting inner strength comes from keeping promises to yourself. Every time you follow through on what you said you'd do, you whisper to yourself, I am trustworthy. And the opposite is also true. Every broken promise sends the message, I don't deserve my own trust. The issue isn't whether others believe in you, it's whether you believe in yourself. And that belief doesn't come from willpower, it comes from repeated action. The stronger version of you doesn't need slogans, it needs you to wake up a little earlier. Focus an hour longer. Complete one small thing instead of delaying one more time. Every small step is a brick. Every act is a chisel shaping your identity. No one sculpts themselves through dreams alone. You must touch reality. With your hands, with your sweat, with unrelenting consistency. If today you feel weak, that's okay. But don't let that feeling dictate your behavior. Stand up, do something, anything. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to begin. Because as long as you act, you still have a chance. If you act repeatedly, you start to transform. And if you maintain it every day, a time will come when you no longer recognize who you used to be. No choice is meaningless. No matter how small, no matter how fleeting it may seem, every decision you make is shaping an identity, either that of a warrior or that of a surrenderer. You don't accidentally become someone, you become who you are through a series of small, repeated behaviors each day. Especially in moments when no one is watching, no one is applauding, no lights are on you, there's only one quiet question. Which version of yourself are you serving? When you choose to get up instead of snoozing for 10 more minutes, you're not just changing your morning routine, you're sending a message to your brain that you are in control, not a servant to your emotions. When you choose to finish a hard task despite feeling tired, you're not just overcoming a challenge, you're carving a new neural path where action triumphs over retreat. On the other hand, each time you give up just this once, each time you allow yourself a little comfort, each time you whisper only today, you are feeding the weaker self. And it doesn't need much to grow. All it needs is repeated compromise. One moment of surrender won't break you, but hundreds of tiny surrenders will leave you unable to recognize the person you've become. You think you'll become strong through some big turning point, a life-changing event, a moment of awakening, a dramatic transformation. But the truth is, identity is not reborn through earthquakes. It is formed through steady footsteps on the ordinary ground of daily life. There is no special day. There is only you and what you do. Every decision you make is a vote. Either you vote for the warrior, the one who shows up regardless of circumstance, who acts even without immediate results, who keeps promises to self without reminders, or you vote for the surrenderer, the one who only acts when it's easy, who only persists when comforted, who only stays disciplined when it feels good. And the terrifying part? You cannot not vote. Silence is a vote. Delay is a decision. Inaction is a behavior. And if you are not actively moving toward your warrior identity, you are by default heading in the other direction. Ego is not some vague philosophical concept. It is the belief system you are constructing daily through behavior. When you repeatedly choose ease, you are programming yourself to be someone who crumbles under pressure. When you choose rest over action again and again, you are shaping yourself into someone who doesn't complete things. When you make promises and fail to follow through, you are teaching yourself that your words don't carry weight. And then you stop trusting yourself, not because you're not good enough, but because you've eroded your own credibility with countless small decisions. Confidence doesn't come from what you say loudly. It comes from what you prove quietly to yourself, that you keep your word, that you're reliable, that you will act even when no one's looking. Self-respect doesn't come from image, but from principle-driven actions no one sees, because ego is not just what you think of yourself. It is the accumulation of the choices you've made and are still making. So don't underestimate those seemingly insignificant moments. When you want to quit halfway, when you want to delay one more time, when you stand between keep going and take a break. In those small moments, you are laying the foundation of your identity. And when repeated, that foundation either becomes solid ground for a warrior or a sinkhole for a chronic quitter. You don't need to win everything to be strong. You just need to win over yourself in the smallest of choices. When you want to delay, act immediately. When you want to stop, push 5 minutes further. When things feel hard, hold your ground. Those seemingly trivial moments are the birthplace of the most resilient identity. Don't dismiss them, because in the end, you won't live according to the ideals you think. You'll live according to the habits you've repeated. And if today you feel like your confidence is faded, your motivation is dwindled, your belief in yourself is weaker than before, don't rush to blame your circumstances. Look instead at the small decisions you've made over the past few weeks or months. Who have you been choosing, the fighter or the escape artist? The one who commits or the one who compromises? The builder or the backslider? The answer doesn't lie in the goals you wrote down, but in the behaviors you've repeated. No one is fixed. You weren't born a warrior and you weren't born a surrenderer. You are becoming one of them, day by day, through every seemingly harmless decision. And the good news is, you can change direction at any time. You don't need to make a grand declaration. You just need one new choice, then another, then repeat, and your identity will begin to shift, not by force of will, but by accumulation. It's not that you lack ability. It's not that you're weaker than others. It's not that you're not smart enough, creative enough, or lucky enough. The hard-to-swallow truth is this: you're missing one thing, the reflex to endure discomfort without breaking. In a world full of convenience and instant gratification, most of what you label as inability is, in fact, just the absence of tolerance for emotional difficulty. You give up not because you can't, but because you're not used to discomfort. Look back at the moments you gave up. Most of them didn't start with actual failure, did they? They began with unmanaged emotions, fatigue, boredom, confusion, self-doubt, fear of being wrong, lack of enthusiasm. None of those things can destroy you. They only stop you from acting. And when you stop acting, you begin to retreat, slowly, subtly, until what used to be a dream becomes something you second guess. But if at that moment you had just done one thing, endured a little longer, you would have moved forward. Most success doesn't come from breakthroughs. It comes from the ability to stay with discomfort longer than most people can. The one who learns to sit with uncertainty, to keep going while still afraid, to persist without seeing results, that person unlocks the potential they already had. And that is the key difference. You don't need more talent. You just need to retrain one reflex. The reflex not to collapse at the first sign of resistance. You've been conditioned to avoid discomfort. Every time you feel tension, you grab your phone. Every time you feel stuck, you reach for distraction. Your brain has been trained to seek quick rewards, shortcuts, comfort. But the path to real achievement doesn't run through that road. It goes through long hours of working when no one is watching, through the loneliness of growth when everything around you stays the same, through the uncertainty of not knowing whether you're even on the right path. Enduring discomfort doesn't mean glorifying pain. It's a high-level psychological reflex. You're no longer ruled by how discomfort feels. You can see it, notice it, but you don't let it dictate your behavior. That's when you shift from passive to active, from acting out of emotion to acting by principle, from living by fragile willpower to living through a structure you've built. Each time you push through a little longer without giving up, you expand your nervous system's capacity. Your brain learns, I won't die just because I feel something unpleasant. And that's the moment you become truly capable, not because you gained some new knowledge, but because you finally accessed a capacity that was always there, previously blocked by lack of persistence. No one is born with grit. It's a reflex you can build. Just like a muscle, the more resistance you tolerate, the more power you gain. On day one, you manage 5 minutes of focused effort. The next week, 15. A month later, you can work deeply for 2 hours without breaking focus, not because you suddenly became talented, but because you retrained your nervous system to adapt under pressure. You already had that capacity when you were a child, learning to walk, to speak, to write. None of it was easy. But you didn't quit. No one said you lacked the talent to walk or had no gift for language. You simply endured the falls, the failures, the confusion long enough to gain the skill. But as you grew up, you forgot that. You begin to believe that if something is hard, it must not be meant for you. But the truth is, if it's hard, it's exactly what's worth training your reflex to endure. Winners aren't those who started out better. They're the ones who kept going longer. You don't have to win every day. You just have to stop turning one hard day into an excuse for total retreat. Whenever you think, I'm tired today, I need to rest, ask yourself, am I physically tired, or am I just being led by emotional resistance? If it's emotional, keep going. If you're truly exhausted, rest with purpose to reset, but never stop just because difficulty showed up. No one lives without pressure. The difference is some people use that pressure to forge a new neurological reflex, while others let it shove them back into the safety zone. Who will you be? The one who grows familiar with discomfort, or the one who always runs? The one who accepts difficulty and moves forward anyway, or the one who only acts when it's easy? If you're doubting yourself right now, if you think you're not capable, don't believe that lie too quickly. Try reframing the question. Not am I good enough, but how far have I trained my reflex to tolerate discomfort? And if the answer is not very far, then congratulations. You've just discovered that the problem lies in a trainable skill, not in some fixed identity. Maturity doesn't begin when you reach a certain age. It doesn't start when you land a stable job, carry a prestigious title, or receive admiration from others. True maturity begins the moment you stop blaming, stop running, and dare to take full responsibility for your life. No half measures, no excuses, no detours, just you and the decision to stop living as a victim. How many times have you told yourself, I'm like this because of them. I wasn't given the same opportunities. I've been hurt in the past, so I can't change. Those aren't truths. They're just excuses you've repeated so often that your brain now believes they're facts. But if you're brave enough to look closely, you'll see you chose to hold on to those beliefs as a shield to avoid the responsibility of change. You say no one understands you, but have you ever tried to understand yourself? You wait for the world to change, but have you ever taken the initiative to transform your inner world? Avoiding responsibility is a cheap kind of freedom, brief, but it comes at a steep cost. The longer you dodge it, the more you surrender control of your life to circumstances. You live reactively, constantly adjusting to events, waiting for approval, hoping someone else will rescue you. Then you become resentful, disappointed, withdrawn, not because the world is unfair, but because you've never truly stood up and taken ownership of everything that happens to you. Maturity doesn't come from comfort, it comes from being pushed to your limits, and instead of shrinking, you choose to own even the imperfect parts of yourself. You stop asking, why is this happening to me, and start asking, what can I learn from this? You stop focusing on who's right or wrong and begin asking, am I living according to my principles? Am I doing what needs to be done regardless of how I feel? Mature people don't live by emotion. They live by principles. They still get hurt, still get tired, still question themselves sometimes. But they don't use those moments as excuses to quit. They don't wait for apologies to forgive. Don't wait for ideal conditions to act. Don't wait for praise to stand back up. Because they know every time you let emotions justify avoiding responsibility, you train yourself to be weaker. You cannot grow up if you keep blaming. You cannot go far if you keep running from pain. And you certainly cannot become strong if every time you fail, you look for someone or something else to pin it on. Real freedom is not doing whatever you want, it's owning the consequences of all that you've done and everything you've failed to do. It's a freedom built on ownership, awareness, and inner strength. You don't need anyone else to change your life. Everything starts the moment you stop running and begin to see yourself not as a victim, but as the creator. No one owes you healing. No one is obligated to fix your mistakes. No one has to understand you, love you, or wait until you're ready. Life doesn't wait. Success doesn't wait. Clarity doesn't wait. There's only you either stepping into responsibility or continuing to drift in the illusion that I just wasn't lucky enough. You can begin very small. Each day, choose one thing you've been putting off and complete it, not because you're motivated, but because you have principles. Write down a past mistake and instead of justifying it, ask, what was my role in this? Think of someone who hurt you and instead of blaming, ask, how did I allow this to happen? These small acts are where responsibility takes root and where real maturity begins to grow. The mature aren't perfect, but they embrace their imperfections as part of the process, and they don't run from it. They rise after setbacks without needing anyone's hand. They learn from pain instead of burying it. They keep promises to themselves even when no one is watching. They act as if the world is watching even when no one cares. You can continue living the same way, making excuses, waiting for the perfect moment, blaming the past, but you'll remain stuck in the shadow of your former self, a fearful, passive version. Or you can begin today. Choose one task and see it through. Choose one mistake and correct it until it stops recurring. Choose one promise and keep it, no matter how you feel. And if you do this often enough, no one will need to call you mature. You'll know it. Because you'll no longer need to hide, no longer need to excuse, no longer need someone to show you the way. You are responsible for you. And from that moment, every old limitation begins to collapse. Motivation doesn't fall from the sky. It's not a miracle that arrives on a beautiful morning, nor a magical wave of inspiration that suddenly wakes you from inertia. Motivation isn't something you wait for. It's the result of a process. And if you're still hoping that one day you'll feel inspired to start, you're gambling your entire life on an illusion. The harsh reality? It's not coming. Not today. Not next week. Not ever. Unless you act first. Most people live in a permanent state of waiting. Waiting for inspiration. Waiting for the perfect timing. Waiting for their mood to settle. Waiting for life to align. But life doesn't operate on your emotions. It responds to your actions, regardless of how you feel. And this truth, though difficult to accept, is the foundation of all transformation. Winners aren't the ones who always feel motivated. They're the ones who act without it. Here's the secret. Motivation comes after action, not before. When you start, even quietly, even imperfectly, even unprepared, you generate momentum. And momentum creates energy. That energy, when sustained, triggers your brain's reward system. And from there, the feeling of, I want to do more, arises. But if you sit still, waiting for that feeling first, you'll drown in delay. People want to write a book, but wait for inspiration. They want to work out, but wait for excitement. They want to learn something new, but wait for free time and the perfect mood. What's the result? They never start, or they start and quit, because inspiration comes and goes like the wind. If you let your future depend on something that fragile, you'll never gain traction. In contrast, successful people build systems of action that do not rely on emotion. They don't ask, do I feel like doing this today? They ask, have I committed to doing this? True freedom doesn't come from doing what you feel like. It comes from the ability to do what you've committed to, even when you don't feel like it. Because in those moments when you act without emotional fuel, you're rebuilding your strength. You're telling yourself, I don't wait for motivation. I create results, and motivation follows. And here's the beautiful part, it always does. Not in fireworks, but in quiet satisfaction when you realize you've kept a promise no one else even knew you made. Think back to the last time you did something hard when you didn't want to. When you entered the gym feeling tired but left with more energy. When you opened your laptop in a fog but ended up writing pages. When you cleaned your space, not because you wanted to, but because you knew it had to be done and felt clearer afterward. Those moments prove it. Action is the origin, not motivation. The weak live by emotion, the mature live by principle. And the exceptional, they turn principle into a non-negotiable system of action. When you schedule writing at 7 a.m., you don't think, you just write. When your training is at 5 p.m., you don't debate, you just show up. That consistency is what builds true power, not those fleeting waves of inspiration. You don't need to start with 10 things, just one. One small act. Do it even when you don't want to. Write one paragraph. Walk for 10 minutes. Read 5 pages. It doesn't matter how big or small. It matters that you're training your nervous system to act without emotional permission. And each time you do that, you kill off the old version of you, the one that always needed to feel good before doing good work. No one's coming to push you every day. No video will inspire you forever. Not even the person you admire most can act in your place. It's just you, your inner commitment, your steady self-command, and the discipline you build day by day. That's why successful people often seem boring. They repeat the fundamentals without waiting for passion. If today you feel lazy, act for 5 minutes anyway. If you feel discouraged, take one small step. If life feels chaotic, clean one drawer. Don't act because you feel inspired. Act because you know you're rebuilding the structure of your life. Every small act is a brick. And you are laying the foundation of a new version of you. One no longer at the mercy of emotional waves. Others may admire you if you succeed, but only you will know the real reason. Because you acted every day without needing a reason. You don't need motivation. You just need to begin. Comfort never shouts to warn you. It doesn't threaten, doesn't command, doesn't raise its voice. It only whispers, softly, reasonably, persuasively. Just enough to make you postpone the most important dreams of your life. Comfort is the silent killer of discipline, eroding it gradually until one day you no longer recognize how much inner strength you've lost. It doesn't arrive dramatically. It seduces you into sleeping 10 minutes longer, tells you it's okay to skip today's workout, reassures you there's still plenty of time. And you agree. Once, twice, and before long you've lost the resilience you once fought hard to build. Don't confuse comfort with recovery. Recovery is intentional. It's scheduled and structured to regenerate energy. Comfort, in contrast, is unchecked retreat. It's choosing stillness when you know you should move. Recovery lifts you, comfort drags you down. Discipline, if not reinforced daily, isn't destroyed by catastrophe, but by subtle, reasonable, and consistent ease. The real danger of comfort isn't in how it feels. It's in the logic it produces. It convinces you that you're being wise, balanced, enjoying life. But in reality, you're training your brain to believe it's okay to quit whenever things feel difficult. And once that message is repeated often enough, you lose the neural muscle required to show up when life truly demands strength from you. Comfort won't knock you out all at once. It rocks you into a quiet spiritual sleep where everything seems fine, yet nothing within you grows. And the discipline that once gave you freedom slowly disappears. Let me tell you something clearly. The great ones don't always enjoy being disciplined. They get tired too. They feel lazy too. They want to give in too. But they understand that comfort isn't a reward, it's a trap. And they build lives that run not on mood, but on systems. They don't wait for ease before they act. They act fully, even when it's hard, draining, or dull, because they know discipline isn't just a tool for getting results, it's the pillar that upholds their identity. Ever wonder why breaking your promises to yourself erodes your confidence? It's because each time you give in to comfort, you're telling yourself, I'm weaker than what feels good right now. And if you say that enough, you start to believe you truly don't have what it takes to do hard things. Discipline doesn't just help you finish tasks, it rebuilds your trust in yourself. And when comfort kills discipline, it kills that inner trust too. Don't think you need to eliminate all comfort from life. You don't. You just need to distinguish between healthy comfort and destructive indulgence. When you set a fixed work schedule, you're prioritizing discipline. When you decide not to touch your phone for 3 hours of deep work, you're expanding your discipline zone. When you keep writing without inspiration, keep studying through mental fog, keep your commitments in silence, you're retraining your brain to act independently of how you feel. Comfort only has value when it's earned through effort. If it becomes default, if it's how you live each day without challenge, it becomes a sedative that kills evolution. You don't need to live ascetically, but you must live with principles. Not everything that feels good is self-love. Sometimes true self-love is forcing yourself to do what's difficult because you deserve to meet the strongest version of yourself. If you're stuck, constantly procrastinating, or feel yourself falling behind without knowing why, look closely. What comfort have you allowed to disguise itself as a reasonable excuse? And how often have you let it infiltrate your behavioral system? Starting today, begin your resistance against ease with one act. Choose discomfort. It doesn't need to be huge, it just needs to be deliberate. Don't stay in bed 15 minutes after the alarm. Don't check your phone first thing. Don't avoid the work that matters. Don't let I deserve rest become your justification for abandoning responsibility. Every time you override the urge for comfort, you reclaim command over your discipline. The weak ego always wants to be pampered by ease. The strong ego knows that only by going beyond comfort can you reach greatness. And discipline is the fire that keeps that strong identity alive, sharp, focused, and moving forward. You won't always feel like doing the right thing. There will be mornings when you wake up with a foggy mind and heavy heart. There will be days when your emotions pull you in the opposite direction of your goals. You'll know exactly what needs to be done, yet a quiet rebellion stirs inside. Today's not the best day. Tomorrow should be fine too, or worse. This isn't even that important. And if you listen to those voices, even just once, you begin compromising with the most dangerous enemy of all: silent surrender. Right action doesn't require emotional agreement. That's the difference between those who live by commitment and those who live by inspiration. Emotions shift by the minute, but the consequences of one wrong choice, made under the influence of the wrong emotion, can last for months, even years. The mature don't make decisions based on fleeting feelings. They make them based on long-term value. And to do that, you must have the courage to act against what your emotions are telling you in the moment. Imagine this: you've planned your morning. Wake at 5:30 a.m., write for 90 minutes, exercise for 30. But when the alarm rings, your whole body wants to stay down. Your mind offers a buffet of justifications. You worked hard yesterday. You need extra sleep to recover. There's no urgent deadline today. And if you say yes, you think you're taking one harmless step back. But you're not. You're creating a system where strong emotion becomes an acceptable override of discipline. Now imagine instead you get up, heavy, unmotivated, not ready. But you still open the laptop and write. You still put on your shoes and walk. You do it because you said you would. And in doing that, you send a powerful signal to your subconscious. I act even when I don't feel like it. Repeat that enough times and it becomes a new identity. Not someone who hesitates. Not someone who depends on mood, but someone who leads themselves. Inner strength is not forged on days when everything flows. It's forged in those exact moments when you want to stop but continue anyway. When you do the right thing amid internal resistance, you don't just alter outcomes, you elevate your identity. And it is identity, not results, that will carry you through a lifetime of adversity. You can justify procrastination with 1,000 clever reasons. You can convince yourself that rest today is self-care, that forcing action is unnatural. But if you're honest, you know when it's care and when it's indulgence. You know the difference between recovery and avoidance. What sets you apart is whether you have the courage to act without motivation, without applause, and despite the scream of your own doubt. Ordinary people act when conditions are ideal. Exceptional people act despite emotional resistance, because they know. Emotion is not truth. Emotion is just data. Temporary, shifting. But action defines outcome, and repeated action defines destiny. The human mind is a master of illusion. One of its most seductive lies is, I'll begin when I'm ready, but you'll never feel fully ready. Emotions will always fluctuate. There will always be a reason to delay, a reason to do nothing. But there will also always be one opportunity to break the cycle. Start when you least want to. Each time you act in defiance of emotion, you rewire your behavior at the neurological level. You teach your biology, my actions are not led by emotion, my will is in command. And with every such moment, you become stronger, no matter how small the act may seem. Don't measure someone by what they do when things are easy. Measure them by what they do when no one is watching, when no motivation is left, when there's only one question: will I keep my word to myself? In those silent moments, a person is forged. You don't need to feel ready, you just need to begin. You don't need inner peace, you only need commitment. Action isn't a reward for feeling good. It's the declaration of your inner freedom, your refusal to be enslaved by fleeting states. Doing the right thing doesn't have to be grand. It might be writing just 200 words, walking instead of scrolling, keeping a promise simply because you made it, not for rewards, not for praise. These small acts, repeated, carve a level of discipline so deep that nothing can shake it. Weak thoughts don't come from the outside, they begin inside, quietly, subtly, in moments that seem harmless. When you hesitate for just a minute, when you give yourself permission to reconsider, when a small thought slips into your mind, maybe, I don't need to try so hard. These thoughts don't shout, they whisper. But if you don't extinguish them at the seed level, they'll grow into a system of logic that convinces you giving up is reasonable, that procrastination is wisdom, that keeping promises to yourself is less important than self-compassion. And the moment you let that thought live, you've already punched a hole in the fortress of your inner power. Strong people aren't void of weak thoughts. They're simply skilled at spotting them early and shutting them down without mercy. When you catch yourself thinking, I guess I don't need to work out today, you don't debate it, you act. When your mind says, I'm not good enough to do this, you don't negotiate, you go silent and focus on the task in front of you. Every negotiation with weak thoughts ends in compromise, and compromise shrinks you. That's not logic, it's a quiet surrender. Mental toughness doesn't come from thinking positively all day. It comes from cutting off the thought patterns that lead to paralysis. Weak thoughts have no power unless you give them time to grow. The longer you let them linger, the deeper their roots go. And eventually, they'll rewrite your internal belief system, turning you from someone with goals into someone drowning in justifications. You must train your mind to treat any thought that contradicts your core values as a red flag. And like any emergency alert, it requires immediate response. No delays, no, I'll reflect on this later, no, let me think this through. Strength doesn't come from deep thought. It comes from sharp reflexes when you sense you're drifting from your standard. Look back at the times you lost your rhythm of discipline. It rarely started with a big mistake. It started with a small thought, just this once. But once became twice, then 3 times, and then a habit. Soon you found yourself back at square one, only now carrying the added weight of disappointment in yourself. There is no enemy more effective at defeating you than the thought you allowed to remain unchallenged for too long. When you decide to change, you're not just facing habits. You're confronting a mental operating system that's been programmed to protect your comfort zone. And it's clever. It disguises weak thoughts as logic, as kindness, as life balance. But if you're not sharp, you'll mistake fragility for maturity. You'll start to believe that quitting is a sign of wisdom, but it's not. Sometimes quitting is just the mark of someone unwilling to be brave, to cultivate inner strength. You don't need to win every battle. You just need to guard the gates relentlessly. Every time you spot a thought that pulls you backward, ask, does this thought serve the person I'm trying to become? If the answer is no, cut it. No mercy, no delay. You don't need a perfect excuse to reject a destructive idea. You only need a high standard, an unwavering loyalty to it. Some might ask, how do I distinguish between a weak thought and a rational warning? Simple. A weak thought makes you avoid. A rational one makes you confront. A weak thought delays action. A rational one urges better action. Let results be the metric. Anything that slows you down, no matter how poetic it sounds, must be treated as sabotage. Your mind is never neutral. It's either serving you or sabotaging you. And you are the one training it through your responses to every thought. If you let weak thinking stay, you're teaching your brain this pattern is acceptable, and your brain will repeat it. But if you sever it instantly, you're rewriting the operating system. Only thoughts aligned with the mission are allowed to remain. True freedom doesn't come from the absence of negative thoughts. It comes from never being ruled by them. You will never eliminate doubt, frustration, or the seductive ease of comfort. But you can become someone who never lets those things rewrite your destiny. And you do that every time you recognize and extinguish a thought that weakens you the very moment it begins. What you intentionally avoid doesn't disappear. It retreats into the background, waiting for a moment of weakness to seize control. The fear you refuse to name, the pain you bury, the memory you pretend to forget, all of it lives in the shadows, operating silently like a hidden OS. Then one day you overreact to a small piece of feedback. You feel inexplicably exhausted despite doing nothing heavy. You keep dodging the most important tasks. The answer is simple. Everything you try to avoid is quietly running the show. It's not external events that drain you. It's the inner war between what you know you must face and the endless delay. Avoidance is a sweet anesthetic, but the price you pay is your inner freedom. Every time you turn away instead of facing something, you trade your power for temporary peace. And that fake peace poisons your spirit daily, turning you into someone who reacts from fear rather than living by principle. We don't avoid because we're weak. We avoid because our nervous system has learned that facing pain means danger. The pain of remembering, the pain of admitting we were wrong, the pain of taking responsibility instead of blaming others. But no one grows without going through that pain. You can delay, but the longer you delay, the deeper it roots, and the more control you lose. You think you're in control by not thinking about it, not talking about it. But the truth is, you're being manipulated by unresolved memories, hidden fears, and unfinished emotional business. Examine your habits of avoidance. You fill your day with easy tasks to escape the meaningful ones. You keep yourself busy so you won't have to face reality. You invent reasons for not starting the conversation that should have happened long ago, and you call it, "I need more time," or "I'm waiting for the right moment," or "I don't want to hurt anyone." But deep down, you know the truth. You're afraid to confront the facts, afraid to change, afraid to step into uncertainty. And it's not your circumstances, it's your fear that's keeping you stuck. The only way to reclaim control is to stop running. Step one isn't conquering fear, it's naming it, facing it, writing it down, looking directly at what you've been avoiding, the unhealed wound, the responsibility you've postponed, the conversation you dread, the decision you know you need to make but still delay. Each time you do that, you reclaim a piece of your power. And eventually you realize it wasn't the pain that was scary. It was the long-held illusion that you couldn't handle it. What's most dangerous isn't negative emotion, it's systematic denial. When you ignore your deeper feelings, you don't eliminate them. You just make them more ambiguous, harder to manage, until they erupt at the worst moments. An irrational anger, a sudden breakdown, a depression with no clear cause. It's not emotion that weakens you, it's your refusal to understand and actively process it. Freedom doesn't come from avoiding what hurts. Freedom comes from looking straight at it without flinching. And that takes training. Practice naming the emotion instead of saying, "I'm fine." Practice observing fear instead of reacting to it. Practice sitting with pain instead of silencing it with work, phone, social media, or humor. Each time you do that, you're no longer a prisoner of your mind. You're the one in charge. You can't change what you won't face. You can't heal what you haven't touched. And you can't grow if you keep building walls around the darkest corners of your inner world. Maturity isn't about denying your fragility, it's about walking through it with courage, because on the other side of avoidance, there is always a version of you that is stronger, clearer, and freer. Feeling stuck doesn't come from your circumstances. It comes from knowing what you need to do and not doing it. You see the door, but don't walk through it. You know what must change, but keep hesitating. And with each passing day, the heaviness builds, not because the problem is too complex, but because you're frozen in a silent battle between awareness and action. Stuckness isn't a dead end. It's a prolonged pause created by your own inaction. Most of what drains you isn't the actual workload, it's the delay in making decisions. What keeps you up at night isn't the challenge itself, it's looping thoughts and inaction. Your mind is caught between what ifs, should I, and a dozen vague fears. But no amount of analysis will ever make you feel ready enough, because real readiness only comes after you act, never before. We often believe we need inspiration to act, but in truth, inspiration only shows up after you begin. When you take even the smallest action, you send a signal to your nervous system that you're not frozen, and in response, your body releases new energy, builds momentum, and opens fresh perspectives. Action is the only way to interrupt repetitive thinking loops. When you remain idle, your brain replays the same worries over and over. But the moment you take a tangible step, write an idea down, make a difficult call, move your body for 5 minutes, you break the cycle. Feeling stuck is the byproduct of living too long in the gap between knowing and doing. You've watched countless videos, read dozens of books, listened to endless advice, and yet you're still in place. Not because you don't understand, but because you haven't consistently acted on even one thing. Knowledge doesn't transform into energy without real-world execution. And it's action, humble, messy action, that forms the only bridge between potential and reality. You don't need to do something grand. You just need to break stillness. One repeated small action creates more momentum than any grand plan that never starts. Each morning, write down 3 tasks. Begin with the easiest. Work for 10 minutes. No matter how you feel, do it anyway. Action doesn't demand excitement. It demands commitment to push through that first wall of resistance. That paralysis only lasts a few minutes, but if you let it win, you'll repeat the same day again. Here's the twist. The more you act, the more energy you feel. The more you hesitate, the more drained you become. It's not action that tires you, it's the suppressed energy of thoughts trapped inside your mind, never given expression. Feeling stuck is simply bottled up momentum. You're not low on energy, you're just hoarding it in your head instead of releasing it through motion. Action is also how you rebuild self-trust. Every time you follow through on a promise to yourself, even a small one, you send a deep signal to your subconscious, I keep my word. That reshapes your identity. On the other hand, each time you delay, you encode a different message. I'm not strong enough. These messages, silent and subtle, ultimately decide whether you rise or retreat next time. So stop searching for the perfect solution. Stop waiting to feel ready. Do something now, not because it will fix everything, but because it will break your paralysis. Split one big task into 3 small ones. Set a 15-minute timer and just start. Accept imperfection, but protect the habit of consistency, because repeated action is the only reliable therapy for long-term stuckness. No one is coming to rescue you. No miracle will realign your life unless you take the first step. And no emotion is more empowering than the quiet relief of looking back and saying, I've begun. Not perfectly, not spectacularly, but honestly. And that's the beginning of everything you've been waiting to become. You're not lazy, you've just become so familiar with a sluggish rhythm of life that you've mistaken it for who you are. You're not unmotivated, you've simply lived too long in an environment where every reflex leans toward delay, avoidance, and hesitation. And slowly, you've started labeling yourself. I'm not disciplined. I'm just not good enough. I always give up. But here's the truth. No one is born with a weak identity. That identity is built day after day through thousands of small choices. The ones where you knew you should act, but didn't. Every time you delay, you're not just wasting time. You're rewriting how you define yourself. You're reinforcing an inner image. I'm someone who never starts. I'm someone who always quits. I live in the in-between. And when that image is repeated long enough, it stops being a description It becomes a definition. You start living up to what you believe you are, not because it's true, but because your subconscious is wired to protect internal consistency. And that need for consistency cuts both ways. It will help you uphold discipline if you believe you're responsible. But it will also keep you stuck in procrastination if you believe you're inconsistent. The most dangerous part? You don't even notice it. You think, this is just who I am. You believe you're not the strong type. But what you don't realize is that none of it is fixed. It's just the outcome of behaviors repeated for too long. Identity isn't something you discover, it's something you build. The bad news? You've built yours unconsciously. The good news? You can rebuild it, consciously, starting now. You don't need to feel like a new person to start acting like one. In fact, it's the opposite. Act like the person you want to become, and your feelings will eventually catch up. Action precedes transformation. And every time you behave differently, even by just 1%, you're rewriting the architecture of your internal identity. Stagnation often grows from two roots, a sense of helplessness and a fear of failure. Maybe you've tried before and it didn't work, so your subconscious learned. Don't try again, it'll just hurt. But here's what you didn't realize. It's not that you didn't try hard enough, it's that your efforts weren't sustainable. You sprinted on excitement, then burnt out and quit. That cycle repeated so many times, you mistakenly concluded, I'm just not capable. You don't need to change your whole life overnight. You only need to take action that contradicts the labels you've placed on yourself. If you've told yourself, I'm not consistent, then stay consistent with one thing for 7 days. Just one. If you believe I procrastinate, then set a 10-minute timer and begin the moment resistance shows up. Not to prove anything to others, but to send a new signal to your subconscious. I'm not who I used to be. The hardest part isn't changing behavior. It's letting go of the old story you've been telling yourself for so long. You've clung to it. For comfort, for justification, to avoid responsibility, but that story is what's keeping you small. It keeps you waiting. It keeps you looping through the same tired results. Not because you want to, but because you've never written a new version. So pause and ask yourself, what are you currently believing about yourself that's keeping you stuck? That you lack discipline? That you don't have the energy? That you're not talented enough? That you're unworthy of change? That it's too late? That you were born a failure? Write it all down. Then write this underneath. This story is old. I choose a new one. Don't wait to feel different to live differently. Choose to live differently. And the feelings will follow. And you are not weak. You're just living in a loop built by unconscious choices. But every small action you take today, repeated, intentional, consistent, rewrites your core code. One step can't break the cocoon, but hundreds of intentional steps done daily can open the doors to an entirely different identity. Not through short bursts of effort, but through the daily repetition of a better choice, over and over again, until it becomes who you are. There is no such thing as neutrality in the process of personal growth. With each passing day, you are either evolving or decaying. There's no safe zone that lets you pause and rest indefinitely. Life doesn't operate like an engine idling at an intersection. Everything keeps moving, and if you don't upgrade yourself, you'll slowly be left behind, worn down and quietly erased from the race, without even noticing. And the scariest part? You're the one choosing that fate, no one else. Everyone faces a point where they must decide, either become a stronger version of themselves or quietly allow their foundation to erode. The irony is that decay doesn't come as a dramatic collapse. It arrives silently, through seemingly harmless decisions, skipping a workout, avoiding a hard truth, choosing comfort over discipline, reaching for your phone instead of a book. Once, then again, and each of those small choices begins chipping away at your internal structure. People don't fall apart because of one big failure. They decline due to prolonged unconsciousness. It's not the external enemy that weakens you, it's the quiet compromises you make with your own conscience every day. You don't need a major disaster to lose yourself. All it takes is refusing to confront the truth, that you've stood still for too long. And standing still for too long is just a slow motion way of moving backward. Everything that isn't nourished eventually withers. Your willpower, your belief, your ambition, your identity. Evolution isn't a privilege reserved for the extraordinary. It is your most basic responsibility if you want to live a life of value. And it doesn't happen through grand resolutions. It happens through small, repeated decisions. Every time you choose discipline over compromise, you evolve. Every time you speak the truth instead of hiding, you evolve. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you evolve. Every time you learn something new, stretch a bit further, finish a task you didn't feel like doing, you expand your capacity, strengthen your core, and redefine your self-image. The whole Chige, the Jean LeBlanc, rests on Sylvia Young's shoulders. On the flip side, every time you avoid doing the right thing because it's uncomfortable, you decay. There is no pause mode. Inaction is a form of action. Delay is a decision. And every decision creates consequences, whether or not you notice them right away. The cost of neutrality is this: you begin losing respect for yourself, because no one can fully respect themselves while knowing they are living beneath their own potential. No one outside has to scold you. You'll feel it yourself. You'll look in the mirror and see your light dimming. You'll carry a heaviness through the night because you know, deep down, that something inside is slowly drying out. And if that lasts too long, you may reach a point where you no longer believe change is possible. That's not the death of action. It's the death of hope. Don't let it come to that. Don't wait until internal deterioration becomes your way of life. Because by then, you won't need anyone to defeat you. You will have already surrendered. Face reality head on. There is no more room for neutrality. You either evolve or you fade. True life only exists in motion. The mind only stays healthy when it continues to learn. The body only maintains strength when it's tested. And your belief only remains intact when it's protected by action. If you feel stagnant, take it as a warning, not a conclusion. And that warning must be met with movement, not self-pity. Begin again, no matter how many times you've quit before. Begin again, even if it feels late. Begin again, because the only thing you can no longer afford to delay is the process of becoming fully yourself. Evolution doesn't require perfection. It simply asks for presence and a conscious decision to keep moving in a meaningful direction. One small step each day, one more inch outside your comfort zone. One more quiet trade, a bit of ease for a bit of maturity. Evolution isn't born of leaps. It's carved from thousands of deliberate, steady footsteps. And with each one, you make a silent declaration: I refuse to decay. Every habit is a story you keep telling yourself. And if you don't pause to examine it with honest clarity, you'll continue living inside an old script, endlessly repeated under the comforting disguise of familiarity. The real danger isn't that you have bad habits. It's that you no longer recognize them as bad. You've rationalized procrastination with, I'm just tired. You've excused giving up by saying, I'm not ready yet. You've masked laziness behind the label of self-care. But the truth doesn't live in comfort, it lives in outcomes. And outcomes don't lie. Take an honest look at your day. How do you wake up? What do you spend your first hour doing? How do you treat your body? How do you speak to your mind? Are any of those habits actually helping you grow into a stronger version of yourself? Or are you merely repeating a series of automatic behaviors that drain your willpower, erode your motivation, and reinforce a self-image you secretly resent? You cannot change your life while defending the very habits that are dragging you down. And you can't erase a habit you refuse to name for what it truly is. You're not too busy. You're spending time on things that don't matter. You're not overwhelmed. You've let your life be dictated by reactivity instead of intentional choices. You're not out of time, you're wasting it in disguise. Stop deceiving yourself with empty phrases that sound reasonable but mean nothing. Every repeated action is shaping your fate. The danger lies in how unconscious they've become. Habits don't wait for your permission, they just need repetition. And once repeated enough, they become your default operating system. If that default doesn't move you closer to the life you want, then keeping it alive is a slow form of self-sabotage. You don't need to destroy everything to begin again, you just need to start with the truth. The truth about how you use your time, the truth about what you're avoiding, the truth about how many promises you've broken to yourself, the truth about why you're not making progress. It's not lack of opportunity, it's that you've allowed procrastination to become your comfort zone. Every time you act against what you know is right, you're sending a signal to your subconscious, I can't be trusted. And eventually you'll stop believing in your own capacity to transform. Don't wait for a major breakdown to wake up. Wake up from the small things. The phone you scroll when you should be focused. The alarm you snooze 3 times every morning. The fast food you grab instead of cooking something nourishing. The phrase, I'll do it tomorrow, that's become your personal anesthetic. Every one of these is a signal. And every signal can be rewritten if you have the courage to name it for what it is. There's no healing that begins in delusion. All true transformation starts with a ruthless truth, that you've lived beneath your potential, that you've chosen ease over integrity, that you've stayed quiet when you should have confronted. But truth doesn't arrive to shame you, it arrives to wake you up. And only when you name the problem accurately do you regain the power to solve it. You cannot rebuild your life on a foundation of denial. And you can't shed the old version of yourself while still cloaking it in excuses. Looking your habits in the eye isn't about self-blame, it's about choosing a new beginning. One where every action, every choice, every automatic response is restructured consciously, so you no longer act out of familiarity, but out of alignment. So you no longer live like a reflex, but like an architect, redesigning your life at its core. You're not weak, you've just spent too long not observing yourself with honesty. And it's time to do that. Not because anyone is forcing you, but because if you truly want to evolve, there is no other way. You can start right now. Open a blank page. Write down every habit that keeps you stuck in mediocrity. Then ask yourself, if you changed just 3 of them, what else would change? Pick one. Start today. Be consistent for 7 days, just one change, just one act of defiance against the default. And observe, because the moment you dare to face your habits with truth, you begin reclaiming your power to lead your own life. Confidence doesn't come from pep talks. It doesn't emerge from affirmations taped to your mirror or fleeting moments of external motivation. True confidence at its deepest level is the natural consequence of action, especially when the action is taken before everything feels ready, while you're still uncertain, nervous, or afraid. Every time you move forward instead of standing still, even if it's just one small step, you plant a seed of trust in the soil of self-discipline. Not everyone sees it that way. Most people wait until they feel ready. They wait until they're skilled enough, informed enough, perfect enough. But they don't realize readiness is not a prerequisite, it is the byproduct of action. If you've ever felt insecure or uncertain, it's not because you're weak or incapable, it's because you've spent too long in a cycle of hesitation, procrastination, and avoidance. You know what needs to be done, start that project, get back to training, learn that new skill, but you hold back, fearing mistakes, fearing judgment, fearing failure. So you stay. And the longer you stay, the more you begin to doubt yourself. Overthinking without action becomes a silent declaration, I can't. Don't wait for perfect conditions. If you're waiting for a flawless environment, a doubt-free mind, or a risk-free opportunity, you'll never begin. And if you don't begin, you'll never accumulate experience. Without experience, there's nothing to refine. Without refinement, there's no growth. And if you're not growing, you're locked in a loop of self-doubt. Ironically, confidence doesn't come from always being right. It comes from being brave enough to act even when you might be wrong. When you take action, you send a message to your subconscious. I'm strong enough to try. That single message, repeated over time, rewires your internal belief system. Each imperfect attempt, each messy step forward, becomes a brick in the foundation of an inner stability that no one can give you, not even those who love you most. You must act, not to prove anything to others, but to restore your relationship with yourself. Confident people aren't those who always succeed. They're the ones who keep showing up. They don't abandon themselves when emotions dip or outcomes disappoint. They don't demand perfection before moving. They move and allow progress to follow. Think about those you admire, the ones who radiate calm strength and magnetic presence. If you look closer, you'll find a pattern. They've taken countless actions behind the scenes. They've stumbled, failed, been rejected, but they didn't stop. They kept going. And each time they continued, they grew, not because life made it easy, but because they trained themselves to stay centered in uncertainty. So, if you're wrestling with self-doubt today, don't look outside yourself for confidence. Build it. Start. Do the thing you've been avoiding. Say what needs to be said. Step out of your fear and into movement, even if it's messy, even if it's awkward, especially if it's imperfect. Because no one can think for you, no one can train for you, and no one can hand you real confidence unless you've earned it through your own repeated action. There's something extraordinary that happens when you act consistently. Your brain starts receiving evidence that you are in control. The part of your brain responsible for threat detection, the amygdala, begins to quiet down. In its place, the prefrontal cortex, your center for logic, focus, and decision-making, activates more powerfully. The result? You feel calmer, more focused, and most importantly, more self-assured. Confidence isn't the belief that you'll never fail. It's the inner certainty that even if you do, you won't quit. And that mindset only forms when you've trained your nervous system to default to action, even when things are unclear, even when you're unsure. Action is the bridge from self-doubt to self-trust. And only when you've crossed that bridge enough times will you finally realize the fear that held you back was never real. It was just exaggerated by a mind too long confined in inaction. No one truly fears effort. What they fear is disappointment, pouring themselves into something and not succeeding. They fear putting their heart into it and not being recognized. They fear giving everything and receiving little in return. And so, to avoid that discomfort, they settle for a far worse choice, not trying at all. Then they linger in a gray zone where they don't fail, but also never rise to anything extraordinary. But here's the truth. No peak was ever reached through ease. Every achievement you admire is the product of unseen effort, uncelebrated persistence, and progress that offered no immediate reward. Effort is not something you rely on only when you're motivated. It's a personal standard you set, a filter that separates you from the crowd. Most people quit when things get hard. They retreat when results aren't instant. They choose the path of least resistance. That's why they remain average. But those who understand the value of real effort enter difficulty as if it were a laboratory for self-mastery. To them, effort is not sacrifice, it's intentional investment. Here's the brutal truth. Effort is the fastest way to find out whether you're truly committed to what you say you want. Everyone dreams, everyone wishes, but very few are willing to walk into the rigorous process where each day you confront your own stagnation, where there are no cheerleaders, no applause, no visible rewards, only one recurring question: will you keep going even when no one's watching? Effort is the most silent yet honest test of character. It doesn't need you to scream slogans. It just asks you to do what needs to be done, daily, steadily, without complaint. When you reach that space where you continue without craving immediate feedback, you're not just getting stronger. You're entering a level of commitment and resilience that most will never dare touch. And that's the line between the ordinary and the exceptional. Maybe you've avoided effort because you once believed it was a sign of weakness, a way to overcompensate for your flaws. But the truth is this: you don't put in effort because you're weak. You do it to forge strength. You don't grind to impress others. You do it to tell yourself, I don't need comfort to do what's right. I choose the hard path because I know that's the path that transforms me. The fear of effort wears clever disguises. It never says, don't do it. Instead, it whispers, what's the point? Or, you're not ready yet. Or, wait for a better time. But these are all tricks, excuses spun by the ego to protect its fragile hold on procrastination. And the more you believe them, the further you drift from your real power. If you want to rise, you must learn to expose the face behind the fear of effort. Look it straight in the eye and say, I see you for what you are, a mirage, and I will act anyway. Every small act of effort adds a layer of resilience. Every time you reject ease, you redefine who you are. Don't wait for validation. The most powerful validation is the one you give yourself after a long, silent stretch of not giving up. Effort won't break you. It will refine you. It will strip away weakness, illusion, and laziness that once held your potential hostage. And what remains after that purge is a new version of you, no longer ruled by circumstances, no longer needing perfection to begin, no longer dependent on praise to continue. Just you, alone. And that is more than enough. Don't fear hard work. Fear living a life where you never discovered the edge of your true ability. Fear the thought of lying on your deathbed wondering, did I really give it my all? Because regret does not come from failure. It comes from knowing you never truly tried. Not everyone running is getting closer to the finish line. Not everyone doing a lot is actually moving forward. There's a widespread illusion that millions fall into the confusion between being busy and being effective. They live as if constant motion is proof of growth, as if being overwhelmed is a badge of ambition. But they forget one critical truth. If you're running in a circle, you'll never arrive, no matter how much you sweat. Have you ever felt like you worked all day yet made no real progress? You wake up and immediately check your phone, respond to dozens of messages, emails, and errands. You're constantly in motion, jumping from meeting to task, crisis to reply. But at the end of the day, you pause and ask, did I actually move forward on the path that truly matters to me? And if you're honest, the answer is often, not really. Busyness is addictive. It gives you a sense of importance, of contribution, of momentum. But in reality, busyness isn't designed to make you aware. It's designed to keep you reactive. It traps you in a loop of urgency where everything feels important, yet very little is impactful. And this state keeps you stagnant without you even noticing. Progress, on the other hand, requires intentionality. It doesn't come from the number of things you do, but from the quality of the things you choose to focus on. Someone who is truly progressing doesn't need to do more. They need to do what matters most, and do it with undivided attention. They know what the true priority is, what can be cut, what should be delegated, and which actions will create meaningful change. They don't get caught up in surface level motion. They go deep, deliberately, into the few things that can transform their life. You could spend 8 hours working every day, but if you can't spend even one focused hour on the task that will truly move the needle, then you're busy, not progressing. And if you repeat that every day, you'll burn out in an endless loop, with only the vague feeling that you tried hard, but nothing actually changed. More dangerously, busyness is the perfect mask for deeper fears. You fear starting that bold project because you fear failing. You fear confronting your procrastination, so you drown yourself in low-stakes tasks to feel productive. You fear facing your own thoughts, so you fill your schedule with unnecessary obligations, and because society celebrates busy, it's easy to justify your distraction as a virtue. If you want real progress, you must resist the seduction of busyness. Sit down, clear your calendar, ask yourself the real question: if I could only do one thing today, what would move me forward the most in the next 6 months? When the answer appears, devote your time, energy, and focus to that before anything else. People who make progress don't have more time than you, they just use it better. They don't start the day on autopilot. They start with intention. They aren't ruled by noise. They prioritize what matters, even when it's not urgent. And by doing that consistently, they create distance while others remain trapped in the hamster wheel of being busy. You can't control everything that comes at you, but you can always control your response to it. Every time you react blindly instead of acting deliberately, you fall back into old patterns. But every time you pause to evaluate, you upgrade your operating system from someone who's led by life to someone who leads their life. Don't let busy become the language of your life. Let progress be the rhythm you live by. Progress means you know where you're going. It means you dare to say no to the trivial so you can give your full devotion to the meaningful. It means choosing the discomfort of focus over the comfort of distraction. It means you understand that productivity is not about the hours you put in, but the value you extract from those hours. No one accidentally becomes the best version of themselves. No one just wakes up one morning suddenly disciplined, strong, and unshakable. Every real transformation begins with a decision. Not a vague wish like "I want to live better," but an uncompromising declaration: I will live as the person I want to become, starting today. Not when you feel ready, not when life becomes easier, but right now in your current circumstances with all your perceived limitations, because there is no moment more perfect than the one in which you choose to take full ownership of your destiny. Ask yourself, who do you want to be? Someone who hides or someone who confronts? Someone driven by emotion or someone who controls their mind? Someone who reacts out of habit or someone who lives by internal standards? Someone who endlessly delays or someone who begins even when things aren't perfect? Because every single day you live, whether you're aware of it or not, you're reinforcing your identity through every small decision you make. And here's a truth you cannot escape. You are not measured by your intentions, but by your actions. People don't look at the dreams you write in a notebook. They look at how you handle tired mornings, how you keep promises to yourself, how you move forward without external pressure, how you behave when no one is watching. And you, deep down, only truly respect yourself when your actions align with the person you claim to be. You want to be consistent? Start by not skipping the first commitment of your day, whether it's 15 minutes of learning, 30 minutes of exercise, or simply saying no to a familiar temptation. You want to be a person of principles? Begin by not compromising on things that make you feel regret later. You want to create massive results? Start by persisting with the small things, because no achievement comes from one grand leap alone. The biggest trap most people fall into is waiting until they're good enough to act. They think they need more time, more motivation, more knowledge, more conditions, but they forget. Transformation doesn't come from waiting. It comes from action taken in the midst of unpreparedness. You don't get strong and then train. You train and then become strong. You don't become confident first, then step on stage. You step up trembling. And that's how true confidence is born. You don't need to become your ideal self before you start living like that person. You need to live like that person, and that lifestyle will shape you into who you aim to be. If the person you want to become wakes up early, don't wait until you love mornings. Just wake up early tomorrow. If that person is emotionally composed, don't wait until you never get angry. Just learn to stay silent when the anger rises, starting next time. Every action, no matter how small, when done with intention, is anchoring you to the identity you choose. And if you're truly serious, write your personal declaration. Who am I? Not based on your past behaviors, but on the person you now choose to become. Write it clearly. No excuses, no vagueness. Read it every morning like a vow, and with every action you take, ask, does this align with the person I've chosen to become? If not, eliminate it. If yes, repeat it relentlessly, because you're not chasing success, you're re-engineering your identity. Don't wait for validation. Don't wait for inspiration. Don't wait for perfect timing. Everything you need already lives inside you. What you're missing is a decisive commitment. And when you make that commitment sincerely, without retreat, the entire universe begins to shift in your favor. Not through magic, but through opportunities that reveal themselves only to those who are serious and fully committed. In the end, remember this: the future isn't somewhere far away. It is being rewritten each day in how you choose to live with yourself. And if you're brave enough to act as the person you want to become, then every decision you make, no matter how small, is paving the way for a destiny far greater than your current reality. It's no longer a wish, it becomes real. No longer someday, but I'm living it. Wherever you are in your journey, return to the core question: who do you want to become? Then begin living as that person, today, not for anyone else, but because you deserve to live in alignment with the greatest version of who you truly are.